Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. My name is Melissa Stewart. I'm the Executive Director for the Southeast Texas region of the Texas Restaurant Association. Couple of quick housekeeping notes. You'll notice we have a Q&A box down at the bottom. If you need to, please go ahead and put in any questions there. Also, you can use the chat box if you have commentary or notes. And if we have anything to send out, we'll put that in the chat box as well. Joining us from the Texas Restaurant Association today are Kelsey Streufert, our Vice President of Government Affairs and Advocacy, and Dr. Emily Williams-Knight, our President and CEO. They'll be our moderators today. And before we start, I'd like to take just a second and introduce our esteemed guest. I'm going to start with the one who's not here yet, but I guess that would let me say whatever I want, but I won't do that. The first up, I'd like to introduce Senator Larry Taylor. Senator Taylor is a lifelong Texan raised in Friendswood. He and his wife, Carrie, have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren. Senator Taylor owns Truman Taylor Insurance Agency in Friendswood, an independent agency started by his father more than 50 years ago. Before his election to the Senate in 2012, Senator Taylor served 5 terms in the House of Representatives, giving him almost 2 decades of service as a state elected official. As a senator for District 11, the communities he covers include Galveston, League City, Friendswood, and parts of Southeast Houston. Currently, Senator Taylor serves as chairman of the Senate Commission on Education. Senator Taylor is the recipient of the Bay Area Houston Economic Partnership's 2017 Quasar Award, which recognizes outstanding leader who demonstrates strong and continual effort to support business foundations of the Greater Bay Area Houston communities. Joining us today also is Senator Hinojosa. A Mission native, Juan Hinojosa is an attorney and state senator representing Senate District 20, composed of Brooks, Western Hidalgo, Jim Wells, and Nueces counties. Senator Hinojosa was a proud U.S. Marine who, after his service in Vietnam, came back and earned his bachelor's in law degrees. Senator Hinojosa served in the Texas House of Representatives from 1981 until 1990, and again from 1997 until 2002 before his election to the Texas Senate. Senator Hinojosa has served as Vice Chair of the Senate Finance Committee since 2009, also serves as Vice Chair of the Senate Select Committee on Redistricting. Senator Hinojosa has been named a top 10 legislator by Texas Monthly Magazine 3 times and a top 10 legislator by Capital Inside 3 times as well. And our third elected official joining us today, we're very honored to have Chairman Dade Phelen, who was born and raised in Southeast Texas. His 4th generation commercial real estate development firm owns and manages retail, industrial, and office property in Texas and Arkansas. Representing House District 21, he serves the communities along Texas' southeast corner, including the cities of Orange, Vidor, and Port Arthur. Phelen currently serves as chair of the House Committee on State Affairs. In addition to his election to the Texas House in 2015, Chairman Phelen was a 2-time governor appointee to the Lower Nueces Valley Authority. Texas Monthly recently recognized Phelen as one of the best legislators of 2019. His wife, Kim, is a solo practitioner, attorney, and together they have 4 sons, Ford, Mac, Hank, and Luke. We are so honored to have everybody joining us today, and I'd like to turn it over to Kelsey to kick us off. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. I had to remember to unmute myself there. And thank you to everyone for joining us today. Senator Taylor, can you hear us all right?
I can.
Perfect. Okay, great. I think we've got everyone connected then, so that's great. What I'd like to do is give each of our legislators a chance to just kind of make some opening remarks. And then Dr. Emily Williams-Knight is going to kick us off with some opening remarks and our first question. So Chairman Taylor, we'll start with you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. These are obviously difficult times, and the audience we have today is going through some of the most difficult parts of it. Just know that we recognize the restaurant industry plays a very important part of our economy as well as the well-being of our Texans. You guys do about 51% of the food service. I understand that the food that's eaten in this state, 51% of it comes from you guys. So we obviously want you guys to thrive and do well. We've gone through some very difficult times. Right now, it's just very important that we're able to get this economy going. I know a lot of you have gone through all kind of hoops and hurdles to stay open and innovating and trying to make it where you could still serve your customers. I applaud you for that. This is certainly a time that calls for a lot of innovation. This came upon us quite suddenly, but I know a lot of you have done great things in making that happen. We just, the numbers seem to be trending well, but I look at areas like down in South Texas, Center Hinojosa, and part of your area, that the numbers are still trending up. But it's very important that we find a balance between COVID and keeping people safe, but at the same time allowing our economy to work. Because if we keep this economy closed for a whole lot longer, we're not going to have anything to come back to. And if you don't have, and there's a lot of other issues that go along with not being able to work. So I think my colleagues on this call would all agree we're in this together. We want this to work, and we want to do whatever we can to support you in that effort. Recognizing that we're a state that has a balanced budget requirement. We can't print money like the feds can. And this is going to be a very difficult session coming up. I mean, you heard from the comptroller that this biennium that we're in, we've got a shortfall of about $4.5 billion. Fortunately, we have several things in our favor. We have a rainy day fund that's larger than about 48 other states combined. Alaska does, in fact, have a larger rainy day fund than ours, but we're in pretty good shape. And I will say, there's been a lot of times we've had pressure to spend all the money that's in the rainy day fund. We need to spend more of it. But we've been very conscientious of that and really tried to be very conservative of that, because it's really for times such as this. When the unexpected comes up, when you still got to pay the bills, that we need to have that rainy day fund. So we're very blessed that people had the foresight to do that when they started way back when. When they first started, they were talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. And now we have about $10 billion, about $2 billion that's already been committed. So we have about $8 billion to help us get through this rough time. But it doesn't matter if we don't get the economy running, we're going to have huge holes to fill. And so we've got real challenges ahead of us. But I just, like I say, I applaud you guys for going through what you've gone through. I know we've probably lost some of your members during this time, and that's very sad. People have spent their life building these businesses, and sometimes they've been taken out through no control of their own, in situations that are beyond their control. So we're all in this, pulling for you guys, and we want you to be successful and get back to feeding our folks and keeping all of us happy. I love restaurants. I eat there. I'll probably more than the 51% of my time is spent in restaurants. So I help account for improving those percentages.
Thank you, Senator. We appreciate that very much. Senator Hinojosa, any opening remarks you'd like to share?
I had to unmute myself. So, well, first of all, thank you for having us join the Restaurant Association members. Right now, we're facing the crisis of our lifetime, the challenges of our lifetime. Obviously, we have had many businesses close. A lot of people have lost their jobs. We have a lot of people that are sick and infected by the COVID-19. And as we try to meet those challenges, it's important that we focus not only taking care of those that are infected, but also take care of our economy. Obviously, the restaurant business is a key part of the economy. I think they've lost over 50% of their jobs. That's a big hit. And as we move forward, as Senator Taylor said, I miss going to restaurants. I enjoy going to restaurants, the socializing, the food, and just being out. So it's a big challenge. I will tell you that as we try to level out the number of infections, we as a state are spending $500 million a week in responding to hotspots throughout the state of Texas. So it's a real challenge. And as Senator Taylor said, our budget will take a big hit, so we will have to deal with that come next session. But in the meantime, we have to work together and focus. What do our restaurant folks need so they can be successful, so they can open the restaurants and be open for business? Because we need work, we need jobs. Otherwise, we can't pay our bills. And quite frankly, the other way to do that is working together as a team focusing on the needs that we have, but also listening to the people that are in the front line, on the front lines of this pandemic. Our restaurant association has many issues they articulated to us, which is very important. So we will listen, try to respond to opening doors on a full-time basis. Thank you for having me as part of your panel today.
Senator, I think your audio is cutting up a bit there at the end. Hopefully, oh, that looks better. Okay, so with that, we'll turn to Representative Phelen. Representative, any opening remarks you'd like to share with our members today? And thank you for being with us.
No, thank you for inviting me. I
Okay.
appreciate it. It seemed like yesterday I was in Austin meeting with some of your board members with the comptroller, and I say yesterday, it seems like 2 years ago now, but it wasn't that long ago when times were much different. We could be around each other. So I appreciate the virtual opportunity to discuss, next session and what we're going through right now. I appreciate my senators, Hinojosa and Senator Taylor, both being housebroken. I tend to forget that you are such accomplished senators because you came through the House of Representatives first. So I highly recommend that. Thank you all for what you do. Y'all on the front lines of this. It's a terrible situation to be in. I personally, when I'm not being a member of the House of Representatives, I'm in commercial real estate, and many of our tenants are in the service industry, obviously. Between the retail sector and the restaurant and bar sector, it's really a tough time right now. And, the PPP is come and gone, and some of the other governmental, safety nets. We'll see what the Fed's come down with in the next coming weeks. The last I saw was a $3 trillion package, a trillion here, a trillion there. And pretty soon you start talking about, real money. That's what they say in DC. But, I hope we talked about this before the session started. It's another reason that not just shop local, but to bank local, because the PPP program, and at least in my community, if you had a community bank that acted early and aggressively, you probably got a PPP loan. And nothing against the big, large multinational, conglomerate banks, but they weren't interested in servicing those loans. So it's just a reminder to your membership to please, have a relationship with your local banks. It seemed like that worked out very well. Down in Southeast Texas, this is our fourth declared disaster in about 2.5 years. So, you can imagine what your members are going through down here in Southeast Texas between Harvey, Imelda, a TPC plant explosion on the night before Thanksgiving, and now this pandemic. So it's just for the service industry, it's extremely tough down here. We're on the Louisiana border, which creates another issue as far as individuals flowing to and from another state that work here, or many of my constituents work there. That's been a hurdle that's been difficult to overcome. We also, we're in the middle of hurricane season, and I know in South Texas, unfortunately took the brunt of Hannah, but, that's another issue that's complicating, recovery is the volatile weather pattern we're going to be in for the next month or two. In my district, I also have 3 state prisons where there is a really skyrocketing positive cases coming out of the 3 state prisons. And also just in Southeast Texas, Joe Destel and I share Beaumont and Port Arthur, where the vast majority of nursing homes and assisted living facilities are for all the counties around us. So our numbers are extremely high per capita, but we also have a unique situation. For the most part, schools seem like they're going to reopen probably in the next month or so. My kids start August 10th at a Catholic school, so they're going to be starting in about a week or so. I think it's very important for everybody, especially folks in the service industry, to try to have some normalcy with education. When this all started, one of my superintendents, Dr. Portier from Port Arthur, who has a very challenging population that he has to manage in Port Arthur ISD, he predicted before all this started, it was back in March when we first discussed shutting down, that he's probably going to lose 25% of his population. He will not be able to find them. And that's proven true. They cannot locate 1 in 4 children that were in school back in March. They have to find an adult to re-enroll these children. And last year didn't even happen. Third graders are probably going to be third graders again next year. So that is a long-term impact. That is it's going to impact public education, which I know Senator Taylor's, up to his neck in right now, along with Chairman Huberty. But, that's not good. It's terrible for the budget. It's obviously terrible for these families and children. I'm going to miss walking in and not seeing Tuffy Hamilton sitting on my couch because he pretty much had a reserved space in my office. But, sessions are going to look different that cycle. There's not going to be just guests dropping in, and your advocacy on behalf of your members is going to be extremely important because they're not going to be able to just walk in my office and tell me, hey, Dade, I'm from your district. I have this restaurant. This is, this is the lingering effects of COVID-19. This is the lingering effects of this hurricane. And what can you do for me? That's not going to occur. I've been on enough of these Zooms with Charlie Guerin to know that at least in the House of Representatives, it's going to be a totally different world. And what that world looks like, I don't know. We have a challenging budget. We have a huge challenge, I think, to public education coming back because of COVID-19. It's going to be a very difficult session. We got a very rough election to get through. I'm glad we're having these conversations now, discussing these things with you, because time is of the essence. It's not the normal interim. I'm in state affairs. We're not having any hearings right now. I don't know if we will. We may have some webinars like this, but so I would encourage, I know you're already doing this on a regional basis. I would encourage you to continue to do it and maybe do it again. I'd be happy to come back on closer to session and discuss matters as they've changed between now and January. But this is very important we do these as much as we can because, again, the preparation for January 2021 is going to be much different. And then how we interact for the next 140 days after that is going to be anyone's guess.
Thank you, Representative. I so appreciate that. And just so our listeners know, we're really privileged to have this group of legislators with us today. Between the three, we have, real leadership on the Senate Finance Committee, which writes the budget. Senator Hinojosa is vice chair. Chairman Taylor is on that as well. Chairman Phelen runs state affairs, which of course is where a lot of our business regulation issues go through. So in terms of talking about what to expect next session, and then of course, Chairman Taylor also chairs education, has been mentioned. So in terms of getting a glimpse of, what we can expect for the next year or two, this is really a great group. So we're just so appreciative of y'all for taking the time to do this. With that, Emily, I'm going to turn it over to you for your opening thoughts, and we'll just dive into questions. And this really is meant to be a discussion, so please jump in at any time, members. We'll monitor the Q&A and Facebook Live for questions as well. But again, just thank you for being with us. Emily, you're on mute.
Should know this by now. Actually, it's interesting. So Representative Phelan's right. We actually, I don't know if you remember, but we had you and Comptroller Hager with our members. It was a great evening. We talked a lot about the future of the industry, and there was this little something called coronavirus, if you remember. And it was that Monday at the board meeting where the stock market took this massive dive. Everyone said, oh, it'll be fine. And we went on with our life. And within 3 weeks of that, we were closing restaurants, right? So it just shows you how quick things change. And you took the time to come meet with the members, and it meant so much to them. So I want to thank all of you. First, I also, at some point, I would love to get to education because I'm not sure everyone is aware. At maybe towards the end, we can touch this, but we have about 175 districts that use our career and technical education programs. There are a lot of Title I districts. It's a way to give people that want to get a job right out of school or maybe go to community college or even up to maybe CIA, they get that preparation, and they also get scholarship money to college. And I am deeply concerned about those students that the world I came as an academic. I just don't know what we're going to do with that CTE program, and that, isn't available for whatever reason, online, et cetera. So, that education part, I agree with you. It's thinking about these kids right now is critical, and that's our future workforce. But I would love to sort of start with, and you've all said this, and I think the word partnership is key. We've been really fortunate as this crisis unfolded to work very closely with Governor Abbott and his team. Whether it was creating the restaurant promise, going out to all the different officials and locations and folks that we have from USDA to FDA, building that, what's it going to take to open a restaurant again, and sort of very thoughtfully step through this, because we know there's this balance of the economy and of course, keeping people safe and healthy. we're now seeing here today, most of our folks that were able to get PPP money, it was about 7%. That money is now running out. We've got about 600,000 employees on the sidelines because even with the 50% cap, it's much more just public sentiment that they're not going back into our dining rooms. We're seeing the rate of closures of these small businesses accelerate. And at the same time, I hear your words about a tough budget, probably a very short amount of time to get bills through next session. And so maybe just some initial comments about, your thoughts on where this is headed for the sector. We put some requests in, right, to secure some of the CARES Act money to help these restaurants put plexiglass up, all the safety, health sanitation. We've got restaurants spending $3,000 a week on testing because, of course, if someone doesn't feel well, we need to get them tested, and all of that burden on small business. I'm just so afraid that the projection right now is we're going to lose 30% of these restaurants. And these are restaurants that are, 30, 40 years old in some cases across our state. And so just would love sort of your initial thoughts on, in this tight budget, in an era where we are, how do we find relief, right? How do we save more of these restaurants that we can, knowing that I'm not sure what's happening up in DC right now. We're very close with our delegation, but they are so far apart at this point and have about a week to come together. So from a state side, I just love your thoughts on that, where you think the restaurant industry stands as far as getting some relief as we go into this next session. I'm not sure who wants to start. Senator Taylor?
Done some help with the letter on the clarification bars and restaurants to 51%. I'm not sure where that is. It's in the governor's office. It's really in their hands at this point, but we're fully supportive of that to help out with some of our bar type restaurants that do have kitchens and all that. I know that's not everyone, but that will certainly help a segment of your industry. A lot of this is just building up public confidence to get them back out. And, there's a lot of debate on masks, but to me, it's pretty simple. Economy, mask. If it helps some other people feel more confident to get out and about, if you're wearing a mask, let's just wear the mask. If you're going to go into a store, just wear a mask. It's not that big a deal while that time you're there. In a restaurant, you wear it till you sit down, and then you're obviously able to take it off. But if that's what it takes, we need to encourage people to kind of, I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I hear both sides, whether it's efficacy or not. But the fact is, if it helps build confidence, we need to do it. There's a number of things like that. I know a lot of restaurants have moved some things outdoors to try to help get some more spacing and even put tents up in parking lots and things like that. This is a time for, you just got to come up with some really creative things. The liquor to go, I think, has been helpful to some extent. It's not the same as sitting at a table and ordering another drink with your meal, which sometimes I've done that. I know it's pretty rare. But I know those are things that our restaurants need. But I think those things will continue. But this is kind of you've heard of BC and AD. Now it's BC and AC. Before COVID and after COVID. I think you're going to see a lot of things will never be the same after COVID. Just the fact we're having this meeting like this, I think you'll see a lot more of this in the future. That includes employers not necessarily going into the business areas maybe once or twice a week versus all week, because they could do a lot of this from home. So it's going to be a changing time, and the winners are going to be those that can innovate and find ways to operate in this new environment. The encouraging thing, now we do have the numbers going up in South Texas, but the encouraging thing is overall Texas, our numbers appear to be plateauing. So to give a little optimism, we think we're seeing some decrease, and obviously we want that to continue on that path. That helps build confidence for people as well. But I'm sorry, but some people, the more they watch TV and the more they're on social media, the scarier they are. Mm-hmm. And that's not helping, because I mean, even like, what was the headline I saw yesterday? They talked about 300 deaths. That was the headline. But then if you read in the article, those 300 deaths weren't in one day. They were like for the last 10 days. Mm-hmm. But that was the headline. And that's so frustrating. That scares people. People were just scanning the paper, saw 300 deaths, and oh my gosh, this thing's going out. It's going crazy. But in the second paragraph, it talked about, well, this is really over the last 10 days. And so that, the data is just all over the board. It's so frustrating for us as policymakers working on education and trying to get our schools open with the numbers. I mean, I'm hearing all different ways of how they're coming up with the numbers. it's quite frustrating. And so people are frustrated with us for kind of moving around, but this is a very fluid environment. But I will say this, it's very important that we get our schools open as quickly as we can, as safely as we can. So we are really trying to make sure that that happens, because that's, for a lot of your labor, they need their kids in school.
Exactly
They
right.
cannot go to work. You know, this distance learning is great for some people, but there's a lot of people who cannot do their job from home. Your workers can't do their job from home. So we've got to really work through and really work on science. And we've gotten a lot of things. One consistent thing I've heard of on COVID since the very beginning, if you'll remember this, its effects on children is much less than everyone else. It's much rarer that they get it. When they do get it, their symptoms typically are less, and their chances of actually dying from this are much less. And that's, COVID is different. We've had, flu is the last season of flu was particularly harmful to our children. So it's a matter of keeping this in perspective. We did not shut down our schools when we had a significant number of deaths of children due to the flu. So a lot of this is just trying to find that balance and trying to make sure we can do this in a balanced, safe way, but understand we have to get our schools open for the benefit of the kids, for their psychology, for our economy, for the parents' psychology. We've got to make this happen, and we just got to find a way to do it, just like we do in the legislature every session. You have the two ends, and we got to have to work together to find that middle point where everyone can live with what we do. Not everyone's excited with any legislation we pass, but they're equally unhappy. How's that? Senator Hinojosa, I think you'd agree with that. That's how the legislation normally goes.
So you're on mute, Senator Hinojosa.
On mute.
I agree with you, Senator Taylor, and one of the challenges that we face right now is that this is a very fluid situation. There's no black and white answers, if you will, to the challenges that we face. I think government does have a responsibility to help businesses in general, but from the federal government to the state to local governments, through the CARE Act funding, the state can certainly provide some assistance, but also remember that some counties and cities over 500,000 receive funding directly by Congress under the CARE Act. So they also have funding available. And many counties and cities have taken the initiative of providing loans at no interest rate to small businesses like restaurants to help them through this very difficult time. For us, doing away some regulations, losing some of the regulations that are imposed on our restaurants. Try to help them. And I tell you, Senator Taylor, I follow CDC guidelines. I know it's not a controversial about wearing masks, but I think, and you hit it right on point, the population, the people have to have confidence that they are safe and can go to restaurants. Right now, people are not even attending restaurants that are open to have 50% capacity because they are afraid. They're scared. So it takes a while to build that confidence up. And I think by wearing masks, practicing social distancing, not attending group pachangas and parties and what have you, we can get there and flatten the increase, get to a plateau of decreasing the number of infections. Then you'll see people have confidence and start attending our businesses and going to restaurants. I will say this much. The multitude of challenges that we face are all across the board. For example, our daycare centers for children, most of them are shut down. We as a state have provided subsidies and grants to help them open because a lot of the people who work in restaurants, as an example, even if they want to go back to work, they can't because they don't have a place to leave their children, somebody to take care of their children. Many restaurants, quite frankly, there's an issue about the unemployment checks that are sent out with the federal government sending $600 a month extra to people who are unemployed. Well, part of the issue is does this discourage workers from going back to the jobs, or do they make more money staying home? I mean, those are issues that we're dealing with and trying to find a way to approach to help our restaurants, to help a business community. to help our economy open up. So I don't, for me, whatever we can help in terms of tax abatements, tax breaks, we need to use all the tools that we have in government to help support our restaurant business. Too many restaurants are closing down permanently, which is not good for our economy. And many of them are just struggling. And this is a nightmare for our business community. And so Taylor, you're right, around our school districts, as we struggle, how do we deal keeping our children safe, our teachers safe, our students, they may get infected, going back home, infecting their parents. It's a multitude of challenges that we face. I don't think there's one solution to helping the restaurant business. I think some of the solutions is extend PPP loans, which might happen, I guess, in the HEROES Act that legislation is being considered by Congress. I think at some point, the CARE Act funding that the state has been provided with by Congress, we're spending a lot of that money just responding to hotspots and taking care of many regions where the hospitals are overloaded, where they have capacity, but they don't have the staff, they don't have the nurses, the doctors, the medical equipment, because many of the doctors and nurses have gotten infected. So we rush in, working with nonprofits like BS FC out of San Antonio. And so we're focusing on that, but at the same time, trying to balance that, making sure that we help our economy open up surely, slowly, but in a healthy way. And this coming session, not only is it going to be challenging because of the budget challenges we face, but the price of oil and gas is really going to the basement. The sales tax, for example, which is a big revenue generator for the state, has completely almost decreased substantially. So the $4.7 billion deficit that we're facing is only maybe for now. It could get worse, possibly. Let me just give an example for the challenges we face in the state. When we finished that session, we passed a budget of approximately $254 billion. We also had a surplus of almost $3 billion. Now on the budget that we passed last session, which ends September 1st of 2021, we're already behind by the $4.6 billion. So come next session, we have to pass supplemental legislation, supplemental bill, just to try to make up and plug in the holes that we are seeing open up because of coronavirus. So the issues and challenges we face are many. But our focus has to be also on the economy, because without the economy opening it up, we cannot increase our revenue. We cannot produce the jobs that people need so they can pay the bills and pay their utilities and what have you. So it's a lot of challenges, but we do have quite a few tools. And I think from our perspective, and I think our perspective, being in government, we have to hear from the restaurant people, telling us how can we help you? How will we make it easier for you to open up? Whether it's doing away with certain regulations, changing some of the regulations, helping out with loans, tax abatements or tax breaks. Those are very important issues. So we need to work together and work as a team to help each other try to find ways to defeat this pandemic and help our families and our business community prosper.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that. I think that's exactly right in terms of our concern about how this impacts the greater economy, right? Because as much as we have a unemployment crisis now and a tax revenue crisis now, if we lose 10, 20, 30% of our small businesses, those problems are going to grow exponentially, right? And so we certainly want to do everything that we can in partnership with the legislature, Governor Abbott, and our federal partners, and our city and local, as you mentioned as well, to prevent that from happening. Representative Phelen, any thoughts on sort of the role of the state with helping restaurants and other small businesses through this crisis?
Sure. I'll just start with, the CARES Act. I've reached out to my congressman. I have two in my district. I have Congressman Babin and Congressman Weber, and requested as much assistance to small businesses as absolutely possible. And my personal opinion is that these larger corporations have access to private equity. They have access to the stock market. They have cash reserves. They're very diversified, and they're able to, pivot around these situations much better than a mom and pop who's been in business for 60 years in the same location. And, the pillar of the community, they don't have that type of, lifeline. So I've requested, whatever they do, try to direct as much to local small businesses. That is the backbone of the Texas economy. Without the small businesses, this engine sputters out pretty darn quick. As far as Texas, I think we have a pretty good roadmap. And if you look at what many of the regulations the governor set aside during through his emergency powers, that's a pretty good roadmap of what we probably need to look at next session. I made a joke on social media that there's going to be about 181 bills filed on drinks to go, because that seems to be a very popular, suspension of the rules. Some of these suspension of the rules have not been very popular, but that one was very popular. Some of the kind of bizarre regulations, like you can't deliver food and alcohol in the same truck. They have to be in separate trucks. That just drives up the cost of business for you guys, for the restaurant association, and for the bars. It's just, why can't I get my steaks and my keg of beer in the same truck? It's refrigerated. No, it's got to come in two trucks. That's just silly. Or, if let's say you're the only good steakhouse in town and you have an opportunity to bring in beef from a certain area of the country, why can't you sell that directly to the consumer? Why does it have to go through a grocery store and just drive up the cost? So what we've seen when these setting aside these regulations, where a restaurant could not open up, but they've got a bunch of commercial toilet paper, because apparently everyone has to have toilet paper during a pandemic, or at least stockpile toilet paper. So my local restaurants were selling toilet paper. They were selling, cleaning products. They were selling disinfectants because they had a stockpile of it. They had a totally different supply chain than the consumer has. But there was a regulation that says, no, you can't sell sanitizer to the consumer. It has to go through HEB, which, by the way, they're able to be open. And I can go buy a tomato plant from Walmart, but I can't go to my local nursery and buy a tomato plant. I can get tires at Walmart, but I can't go to my local tire shop and get tires. So we have a pretty good roadmap of how we need to look at this next cycle of and we prepare for hurricanes, we prepare for fires, we prepare for earthquakes, tornadoes. Now we need to be prepared for pandemics, and the picking and winners and losers we've got to take a really hard look at that, because, we look at the bars right now. Many of my bars they don't sell 51% alcohol. That was the easiest permit to get. That's why they did it. But now they want to convert it. We need to look at TBC and say, why are we making everybody jump through hoops? Why are these brew pubs? What's the difference between a brew pub and a restaurant? They're all going out of business. I feel for them. They are dropping like flies. And in my district, we finally got 3 or 4 nice little brew pubs. These families put all their heart, soul, and their savings into it, and now they're struggling. They're struggling, and they shouldn't have to. So I think all these regulations, it's a good roadmap for the state of Texas to take a look at. If we had a special session tomorrow, that's probably what we would have to do. I don't know what else we could do in a short time frame, other than maybe look at these regulations that have been suspended and say, let's get them off the books forever. I think there's also a component of local government that maybe people aren't really paying attention to as much. And then this is more of my commercial real estate hat as well. Curbside is probably here to stay. People have fallen in love with curbside, whether it's grocery stores or restaurants or pharmacies. So we also look at your fire code. How long can someone park in front of a building?
That's
Because
exactly
the fire
right.
lane. I mean, that we got to look at something like that. There's gonna be a lot more folks who want to do drive-throughs. Well, I mean, some municipalities are pretty stringent upon turning radiuses and all the things you have to have. And no, you can't have a megaphone too loud because it just, it may interfere with the neighborhood behind you with someone ordering, food at midnight. What decibel level that may be. There's a lot of local regulations that's probably going to have to, because the way I think the real estate market is going to work going forward is going to be very, very interesting, as far as not just office. That's a whole different, that's a whole different market. That's probably going to change with people working from home. But from a retail restaurant standpoint and bar standpoint, I think local regulations on how they can actually operate with to-go and curbside is going to be interesting. To bring up the unemployment checks, I drove through a shopping center of mine the other day that had 16 tenants, and 14 of them had help wanted signs. and they've been up there for a while. No one's going back to work as long as they're making $25 an hour. I mean, why would you go back to work? And that's a business decision. I could stay at home and watch Netflix and make $25 an hour, or I could go wash dishes for $9 or $8. They're not going to do it until the unemployment rolls out. Your sector is going to be, very much underserved and understaffed. And even if you're able to open up 100% tomorrow, where are your people going to come from?
We don't have the staff.
Where are they going to come from? And not if they're getting that kind of unemployment checks on the side. And so I've seen it in a service sector, across the service sector, there is a mass need for employment. And until those checks stop coming, in the mailbox, you're going to suffer. So, and of course, the immunity standpoints. I mean, how do we look at immunity from a federal and state level? If you're up and operating and someone gets sick in your establishment, I mean, that's almost a reason not to reopen because of the lawsuits.
Why would you? Yeah.
And so, that's something that I think we all need to take a look at. And there has to be some buyer beware in a post-COVID world, like Senator Taylor said. This is post-PC, year one PC.
And Representative Phelen, I think you make such a good point, which is our agendas we're trying to think about next session is exactly what you said, is we've now seen these lines, right? We have restaurants that can sell their prepared food in grocery stores. The governor's office was very grateful that we turned our restaurants into grocery stores, right? So you could get a box of liquor, toilet paper, cleaning supplies, raw meat. We have a number of our big chains that actually stayed in business by just producing meat. Raw meat you could cook at home. And so getting all of that solidified legislatively, I think is going to be so important, because we've also broken down a lot of barriers, right? Even the 3 tiers of alcohol, we worked so well through the crisis together, even to get mixed drinks to go, right? Which is something that we never thought could happen, but we got everyone around, and they can see if you don't get the restaurants back up and running, their businesses are going to suffer long-term as well. And so I think you're right. It is, but I've never heard it in those words, right? Kelsey, that sort of is the roadmap for us, is to say these things have worked. We have evidence. We know it drives the, success. And then also thinking locally about some of those restrictions, because curbside, interesting enough, we've not seen, when restaurant dining rooms opened on May 1st, I guess, curbside stayed consistent the entire time. We never saw a drop off. And so it's also helping these mom and pops retrofit their businesses to be able to do delivery and takeout. And then one of the things I'd love to talk about is delivery companies, third-party delivery. You've seen a lot of other states and cities do these emergency orders. They tend to be more blue states, but in general, there's emergency orders capping. And we know we don't get caps likely on delivery fees, but if you're losing money in every order that goes out by a delivery company and the fees aren't transparent or clear, or at the end, you're actually having to give money, right, in order to do this, and they have all your customer information, it feels like a very one-sided relationship. And so we would love to have some legislation that really brought transparency to pricing and actually had people and consumers in restaurants be able to compete and not actually be taken advantage of. So I would love, I also appreciate the free market side of this. Can't imagine we would ever say as a business, this is all you can charge, but wonder if there is some type of solution, because delivery is going to be critical, but you can't do delivery if you're losing money on every order.
Well, and just to add a little color to that, I mean, we've seen examples of restaurants not even agreeing to be on a third-party delivery platform, right? They're on there without their consent, their branding, their trademark, their menu is all being used without their consent. And of course, if anything goes wrong with that order, the consumer is not blaming the delivery company, right? They're holding that against the restaurant. And so just something to bring, to really kind of bring some competition and true free market to that arrangement, I think is a big part of, when we talk about innovating and adapting to this PC world, post-COVID world, not politically correct world. That's going to be something we need to address, I think. So I'd love to hear y'all's thoughts on that.
Well, the third-party delivery, I honestly am not familiar with that topic at all. I haven't used it. I want to go see the people. I want to give them a big tip. I've always been a good tipper, but during this COVID, I wanted to give people good tips. And like I said, I haven't used any of the Grub Hubs or any of those guys. Wanted to get out and see people, even if it was through a drive-through window or takeout at the front door. But so those are interesting issues. I'm not familiar with those. I'd be happy to look into those and help with Representative Phelen on that as well, because that's just not something I'm familiar with.
Yeah, we're doing a lot of educating on it because it is one of those things, it's great innovation, and we certainly want to work with those companies. It just needs to be a two-way street, right? Oh, Senator, you're on mute. Senator Hinojosa. There we go.
I'm also, quite frankly, unfamiliar with that issue. But I want to touch on an issue that Chairman Phelen brought up, and that is targeted liability protection. To me, it's pretty important for the simple reason that as soon as some people get sick going to a restaurant, lawsuits are they're going to start filing lawsuits against the restaurant owners. It's very unfair, especially situations we find ourselves in. So we have to address that issue this coming session, if not sooner, for the simple reason that it's a huge liability being faced. And I guarantee you, there will not be any hesitation by patrons or lawyers to file lawsuits against restaurant owners, regardless of what the situation is. And then the other issue is insurance. A lot of owners purchase insurance for coverage to deal with the pandemic, and the insurance company are refusing to pay. So those are issues we need to address. Hopefully some without having to wait till the session, but others we have to wait till the session, unfortunately. And maybe the liability issue might be addressed by Congress.
Yeah, and actually we would love your support on that. Even with, we talked with Senator Cornyn, actually surfaced the bill on liability protection. It's part of the HEROES Act. It's being negotiated now. We're hearing that the two sides are not coming together on the importance of this, but it's for healthcare, schools, and business. And if I'm a business owner who's already not making money, and now you're going to put a bunch of trial lawyers after me when there's no causation, it's very difficult to find with COVID. I may not stay in the game. And so to us, if there's anything you can do, because you're close to them as well, is just to really, even Congressman Brady, right, get this over the line and don't settle unless there's liability protection, because we know that it's just, we've been open, what, 2.5 months since May? 2 months? I mean, it's coming. And it's not that we think that we'll lose those cases as restaurant owners because of causation, but we don't have the funds to fight those cases. And that's where it's going to go south quickly. And there is deep concern right now in our sector. There's deep concern in schools. But it was very frustrating this morning to see that they're now pitching potentially liability protection as the reason the two sides of Congress can't come together. When to me, like Senator Hinojosa, it's such an obvious thing. And it goes till 2024, so it gives us time, hopefully, to get through this. So whatever you can do with our, federal congressional colleagues, we would appreciate it, because we see this as a major issue.
And the other one is insurance coverage. You buy insurance, you pay your premiums, then when you need it, they don't want to pay.
Yeah, we haven't had one restaurant, not one has reported. We've been working with Texas Department of Insurance, but not one business interruption insurance policy has paid out, with or without inclusion of viruses. There's apparently a difference between a virus and a bacterial infection and something else. And whatever this is, not one policy has paid out. So when these restaurants closed, remember, they also lost all their inventory and filed all their cases to be able to get that reimbursed, and they got zero. And so I think that just adds to the pain of loss.
I agree.
Well, this isn't going to be popular, but the business interruption, and that is on a property policy, and it's for perils such as fire, lightning, hurricane, the things we're familiar with in our area, particularly along the coast. So, and I've seen a number of them that actually specifically excluded pandemic. I'm not sure about the ones with virus, but those policies, unless it included that, were never intended to cover something like this. I know it's frustrating. People are going to not be happy to hear me say that. If you want to go back and change that, once again, in an AC era or a PC era, that can be changed, but insurance companies are going to have to charge for it, and that coverage is going to be very expensive. The insurance runs on the rule of large numbers and small number of people having claims. Well, obviously with a pandemic, everybody's got a claim at the same time, and it's not limited to one geographical area. So, and you can see what the pandemic has done this time. I'm not sure we'll ever do this again in the same way. We'll treat it the same way. But this would be an incredible amount of loss. In fact, if you went back now and tried to make the insurance companies pay these business interruption losses, you probably wouldn't have a lot of insurance companies.
Now, they
And
say
it's
it's
the same deal.
$3 in exposure.
Pardon?
Global insurance companies, $3 trillion in exposure
Yeah.
if they were to pay out those claims.
Yeah, I think you'd be talking about global reinsurers going under. You'd be talking about domestic insurers going under. So if we're going to do that, you have to go back and price for it. And if we're going to, they can add that and offer that as an option. But I'm afraid it's going to be very expensive. And I'm not sure how many people buy it. But once again, we don't have the benefit of hindsight as 2020 for this pandemic. But I think we're going to learn a lot of things during this pandemic that we probably won't do the same next time. And they said it's a novel coronavirus. That means it's new, and we didn't know anything about it. And that's exactly what it's proven to be. And we're still trying to figure out what all it's doing and how it's doing it and how bad it really is. And the numbers, once again, the data, it's so really hard to tell. We can tell deaths, but then we hear stories about deaths being called COVID when they were taken in an ambulance from an accident, and then it shows up later that it's a COVID death. So, I mean, all the numbers are very difficult to pinpoint at this point. But I was just looking at some chart the other day with Sweden, which never closed down. They were showing the deaths per, I believe it was 100,000, and it was very close to ours. And they didn't shut down. I mean, ours was a little bit higher.
Not much though.
But it wasn't much higher. And I'm just like, they didn't do any of these things like shutting down. So, there's a lot of different things that factors involved, different populations and all that kind of. So it's hard to compare country to country. But hopefully, as we get away from this and look back on it, hopefully we get some of that data that's more clear. But yeah, I'm hearing a lot of really hard to understand why they're doing. I know they're trying to get the data out quickly, but some of the data they're getting out, I'm hearing, that the people who've tested multiple times, they've had COVID and they're trying to get back to work. They keep testing. That those are, as long as they're done on different days, those are showing up as additional positive cases.
Correct.
In the state of Texas, we're now doing 60,000 tests a day. How many of those are for people who've already had it and they're just trying to get back to work, but still they're showing up as new positive cases? So what I'm looking at and what we've been looking at as a state is the 7-day positivity rate, but even that's affected by people being tested multiple times. And that number is coming down, but it's higher than it was. But I'm wondering how much of that is duplication. The other thing obviously is deaths. Still a little question on that. But the hospitalization is the one number we really can kind of count on. But then I'm hearing everybody goes to the hospital for whatever reason they go, they test them for COVID. If you came in for an appendicitis or for a motorcycle accident and you test positive for COVID, now you're a COVID hospitalization. And to me, there ought to be two different categories: COVID hospitalizations because of COVID and people in the hospital and they have COVID. Two different things in my book. Because we're, once again, the fear factor for people, they're hearing these number of people in the hospital for COVID. Oh my gosh, it's 9,000 people or 10,000 people. It has been coming down. But if you could really say how many of those really went into hospital because of COVID symptoms and are really sick from COVID, or they just had to go to the hospital for something else and now they test positive and they all get thrown in together. Once again, I think it kind of drives that narrative that we're hopefully worse shape than we really are.
Well, and I think that's where the restaurants are so frustrated. So they feel like they've been targeted in one regard, right? Whether it be through the media or public narrative is unsafe. And yet so many states that have really strong contact tracing are showing that it's family parties and backyard gatherings and it has nothing to do with restaurants. But then when, one day San Antonio has 3,000 positive cases, the next day, oh, those were antibodies, pull those out of the numbers. And so I think some of the frustration comes if you're about to lose everything you've invested in for 30 or 40 years and the data isn't correct, that's a really tough pill to swallow.
Yeah.
And I think that's where there's just so, like you said, there's so much frustration. And with it seemed to be there'd be a consistency, even in contact tracing. One of the things we went after early on was some of the cities had very different contact tracing forms, right? Where certain activities weren't even on those forms.
They weren't even allowed to ask.
But you could ask about a restaurant.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things that frustrates me. And you in the restaurant business know this very well. We started reopening May 1st. And we'd just gone to 75%. The numbers have been going down the whole time until Memorial Day. And the people on this call know that their restaurants weren't at 75%. So the idea we allowed them to go to 75% didn't mean people were there at 75%. The numbers had been going down and all of a sudden they started going up. And there were several things that happened over the Memorial Day weekend, but some of those things you couldn't even ask about. The
Right.
contact tracers were not at, from the state, we've helped the larger metropolitan areas and cities with employing contact tracers, but they're actually controlling their program. And so that's one of the things that really frustrates me. We'll never be able to go back and look and see, well, where did all this really come from? Because they're not asking some of the questions I think would be very helpful.
Well, I want to be respectful of y'all's time. We're already a little over, but I want to make sure everyone gets a chance for kind of a final word, if that's all right. Chairman Phelen, I'll start with you. So we might come to you for a minute. Just anything else you want to add, anything you want to address you didn't get a chance to. Thank you again for being with us today.
No, thank you, Kelsey and Emily and Melissa. I appreciate the invite. These are very, very important group chats. And I think we need to continue this through the interim. And, this may be the norm come session again, and we don't know what session's going to look like and what type of gatherings we're going to be having. So this might be the new norm for the foreseeable future. Your local members are obviously always welcome to contact me in my office, and we'll work through issues. We were able to help a few convert from the 51% license to regular license, and we'll continue to do that either through TBC, whatever we have to do to keep moving forward. I think there's a lot of there's a roadmap here for some really common sense reforms for next session, and just like my two senator friends who've been through hurricanes, we have a roadmap for those. I mean, they're not always the same. But, those have always been disasters where you try to get back to work as soon as possible, and the government tries to help you get back on your feet as quick as you can. But now we've just told people to go home and watch TV and just wait till it's over, and we just don't know when it's going to be over. So we have to get back to normalcy and do it in a respectful manner. With CDC guidelines and et cetera, I'm a germaphobe, so this is all up my alley. I love hand sanitizers everywhere. I haven't touched a bathroom door handle since 1993. And so I'm used to this stuff. I don't even mind the mask because I can go to Home Depot and no one knows who I am. And they don't ask me why I haven't built the wall down in Mexico, between Mexico and the U.S. yet. I said, well, first of all, I'm not in Congress, but now they don't know who I am. So it's great. So I kind of like the mask, but I think that, we got to be prepared for that to be the case for a while. And like Chairman Taylor said, to give that confidence to the consumers to get back to your establishments and spending money, and the workers to get back to working. And we all going to get back to being productive members. And, just one more time with the alcohol to go. I mean, I live on the Louisiana border, and that's been the law over there since I was 16 years old. Not that I would know anything about that, but apparently you could go over there at 16 with a Blockbuster card, which they don't even have those anymore. And you get yourself a drink to go. They put a little piece of masking tape over the hole in the cup and say, just don't put the straw in, and you're all right. So anyway, those are things that, my goodness, if they work in Louisiana, they can work in Texas. And so we need to look at the broad spectrum of how we can make regulation. This is a good opportunity to get rid of some silly regulations that's built up over 150 years. And my last question would be actually for Chairman Taylor as well. Is I want to know if he's able to surf in a mask, or do you surf mask free? I'm assuming you surf without a mask, but again, thank you all for your advocacy, and reach out to my office. Of course, my colleagues' office on the phone on this call. We need I'm not in the restaurant business. They're not in the restaurant business. So we need to know how this has impacted y'all. I've got a pretty good idea how it has. But we need your input as we draft legislation. We've got a hostile budget cycle. We have redistricting. We have this pandemic to fight through. So you're not going to see a lot of legislation pass, to be honest with you. So the sooner we can get something that's done and agreed to, the better it has a chance of making it to the governor's desk. And thank you all again for having me.
Thank you, Chairman. And I think that's exactly right. Emily and I are working really hard to get that agenda, really targeted and specific and narrowed down and agreed to. So I appreciate that advice. I also love what you said about just kind of learning from our experience and, battling through these natural disasters, because the reality is Texas is used to being a resilient and a strong economy, especially along our coast. So it's so great to focus on the coast and to hear from y'all today, because it really does, I think, provide a great roadmap of how we need to get through this. So thank you for that. Senator Hinojosa, I'll turn to you for kind of final thoughts.
Well, thank you so much for having us here with this very informative discussion. Let me say this. I agree with Chairman Phelen that with hurricanes, we certainly have a handbook and we know how to deal with them, and we don't reinvent the wheel. But what we're facing right now is extremely different than a hurricane. It seems like we're fighting a virus that mutates and like fighting a ghost, and it changes. And so it's a very difficult situation. And as we learn as we go in many respects, and that's what we're doing. So for us, the key is working together, helping each other, and focusing on our priorities to get our businesses back open again. The issues that we'll face next session are going to be very challenging. But as my colleague stated, the sooner we know what the needs are to help the restaurant business open the doors successfully and fully and help financially, the better we will be. So again, thank you for inviting me here today.
Thank you, Senator. Really appreciate you being with us. All right, Senator Taylor, last but certainly not least.
Well, thank you. Chairman Phelen, I will say if you've got a Blockbuster card, you're probably over 16.
I was thinking the same thing.
And no, surfing is one of the best social distancing things you can do. And you get constantly rinsed off. So I'm all good without a mask surfing. In fact, I caught some good waves during Cristobal. I'm sorry if that affected you guys a lot of rain, but we had some good offshore winds here. But I would just say, in summary, we need to keep up this line of communication as we get into session. We're going to know things better than where we are. And once again, I hope optimistically that we are back in the Capitol, more like normal by January. And I really am. I'm always an optimist. I wouldn't be in this business if I wasn't. But I really think we have a good chance to be back in the Capitol. There will be some things differently, like having huge crowds in your office. That may very well have to change. But hopefully we'll be back doing that. I'll be back with my colleagues like Senator Hinojosa. Can I just say it is such a pleasure to be in Texas in the legislature. You see all this stuff going on at the national level between Democrats and Republicans. We don't have that here. Senator Hinojosa is a good friend of mine. We've worked together on so many issues, and you can see he understands that we've got to keep our economy going. This is very important. But we work together and we negotiate, and we don't always agree on everything, but we work together, and it's a very nice environment. We go to dinner all the time, and I just really appreciate that. And I'll say something else about Texas. Going through something like what we're going through right now, I would not want to be anywhere else but Texas. Texans are made to take on challenges. It's in our DNA. From our very beginning, defeating another country to become our own state, our own country, putting man on the moon, weathering hurricanes and rebuilding, raising cities up and keeping going and moving forward. It's what we do. And this is the new thing. This is the novel coronavirus we've had. But we are going to meet this challenge together, working together, and we're going to come out on the other side better than we were to start with. It's going to take a while, and there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of people out there I know are very frustrated and desperate. I would just encourage you to hang in there. We are going to get through this, and I think the trend lines are going our direction, and we just got to continue to work together and hang in there. And I appreciate this time spent with you. I appreciate the time with my colleagues, and hope you all have a great day and hang in there.
Thank you so much, Senator. Emily, you want to take us home?
Yeah, Senator Taylor, we actually had the same remarks. I have to tell you that one of the fortunes I have is I sit amongst all the CEOs of the restaurant associations across the U.S. And two things have happened in this crisis. One is that we've become the loudest voice across the legislature, so our delegation has gotten so much done in Washington on our behalf, right? So from a restaurant industry standpoint, we've got more of the national chains moving in, more new concepts. I don't think that's going to change. But I also want to say that I think what's great about it is that we are in Texas. And if I look at my colleagues in Illinois and California and Oregon and Washington, they are looking to us now because we have such a strong partnership with the governor's office, with all of you. You get business, you get the industry. And so I just want to say the same thing. I mean, I feel like in a pandemic, I could not have landed in a better spot than Texas. and we will get through it. So I appreciate you sharing that optimism because people are hurting. I met with a restaurant owner today. I met with a group of owners yesterday. You know, they're just looking for the unknown and the uncertainty, right? I mean, and we don't have a roadmap for them. So just that optimism you're expressing, all of you, and that you're here to help them. I just want to tell you I'm grateful because these small business owners, we need them here. And if they can just hold out a little longer, we're going to get them through it. And so I say the same thing about Texas. And I'm so grateful to the legislature here because you operate in a way that is collaborative. And it's going to make a huge difference from what we're trying to navigate through in Washington right now. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, with that, we'll sign off for today. Thank you again to our legislators. Thank you everyone for tuning in, and everyone take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.